Uh, hey everybody, it's me, Nap. I just wanted to let you know that if you're only listening to the You Mind podcast, you're only getting half the story. Be sure to tune in for Creeping Wave Radio to hear all the, exciting things that happen when the mics go off in the studio. New season coming October 2019, so now's the perfect time to catch up, really. The link is in the description.
Napoleon.
Oh, Scratch. Hey, boss man. What seems to be the problem?
Who is that beardy distorting the time-space continuum out in my hallway?
Oh, that's the Traveler.
The Traveler?
Uh-huh. He came here from 1964.
Why?
Oh, I was going to interview him for my show. I thought it might help me recover some of my memories if I talked to someone more connected to the,
Past?
Yeah.
Memories can be a burden, Napoleon.
Okay.
Be careful what you invite into your life.
Oh, sure. Great. Sort of ironic you saying that, but, you can come in now. We're all set up.
Don't be scared now, but it looks like you just wandered straight into U-Mind country. That's U-Mind, short for unaffiliated mind games, and you ain't never gonna be the same again. Brace yourself. It's time for a red-hot truth injection. Oh yeah! That's right, bitch. We're rounding up the sheeple and shaking them awake. U-Mind, too damn bad. We're gonna set fire to the wool over your eyes. Feel the burn, baby. Hot damn. We're toppling the lies of the mainstream media one by one. Woo-wee. Watch them bad boys fall. Hey, Universe A. This is Universe B calling, and we're gonna tear you a new one. You mind?
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's me, Nap, again, and I am here today with the Traveler.
Hello.
Yeah. So, how are you today?
I'm excellent. I'm in this odd place that is not 1964.
Yeah. So, you are a time traveler, are you not?
That is correct.
Oh, very interesting. Can you explain the principles of time travel in layman's terms for our listeners?
Well, what's really easy is the fact that I time travel the same way everybody else does. So right now you are experiencing time travel at the rate of 1 second per second, 1 day per day, and you will continue to do that until you shuffle off this mortal coil. And I do the same thing. I'm just 55 years behind you. So right now I look at the calendar and it's March 21st, 1964. Johnson is the president, Khrushchev is the premier. Beckett just came out a couple of weeks ago, and my God, that was a gay movie. Don't tell anybody.
Interesting. So, are you here via time portal, or how are we communicating with each other right now?
Well, I'm not sure how you got me here, other than your fantastic dress that you're wearing,
Well,
which I
thank you.
hope pictures will accompany whatever this is. But so I maintain a portal called Galactic Journey. It's called Galactic Journey, and it can be reached at galacticjourney.org, all one word. And Galactic Journey is a portal where everyone from this time, which I believe is 2019, can see the past as if they're there and experience it day by day, just as we do.
Interesting. Are you at all worried that the Soviets might get a hold of this technology?
Well, if they do, then they'll just have some sort of time travel device that goes to 1919, and how useful is that?
Yeah, I guess you're right. So, speaking of the Soviets, which are people I've been dealing with a lot lately, let's not go into that. Well, Russia seems neck and neck in the space race with the US right now. I guess, how do you feel about that? Are you a little nervous or?
Well, I want to give full credit to the Soviet Union for opening up their astronaut corps, or I guess they call it their cosmonaut corps, to women as well as men.
That's
So
right.
bravo, hats off to Valentina Tereshkova, who flew in June of last year. The Soviets really like to rub it in. So we finished Project Mercury. We sent a guy in space for a full day, and we were feeling very proud of ourselves. And then just to rub our noses in it, they sent up two people up for several days, and one of them was a woman. there's a book out that just came out a couple months ago. I'm about to review it actually in a few days called, I think it's called Marooned by Martin Kaiden.
Hmm.
And it's all about how we launch a long flight Mercury in the next few months to compete with the Soviets who just keep beating the pants off of us, and he gets stuck up there, and how do we get him down? It's a really neat book, actually, and I don't even know if I'd call it science fiction because it very well could happen. So I guess I would say the Soviets are winning, but I think that's good. It keeps us on our toes, and I
Hmm.
think ultimately we're all in the game together.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Though earlier this year, the U.S. did experience kind of a little bit of a snafu with Ranger 6.
The I feel bad for NASA. So NASA has had 6 failures of Ranger in a row. So Ranger is a probe designed to hit the moon, and you think it wouldn't be that tough to hit the moon, which is pretty big. They've had 6 tries at it, and it hasn't worked very well. And before that, they had 3 tries with the Pioneer Able lunar probe. So that's 9 tries in a row that we have not been able to get a moon probe to work.
Ouch.
But we're going to launch another one soon, and I'm sure that one, Ranger 7, is going to work.
Yeah. I think the unique thing about Ranger 6 is it was supposed to have television cameras on board, wasn't it?
It did, and in fact, everything about Ranger 6 worked perfectly except for the television camera.
Yeah.
But other than that, how was the play, Miss Lincoln?
That's right. So, well, do you think that it's a good idea to televise these things with the Russians so close on our heels?
I think that's what makes us better than the Russians.
Hmm.
That is the merit of a free democracy, is that we show our failures on television for everyone to see, whereas they keep it a secret until the end. We have no idea how many failures the Russians have actually had behind the scenes.
That's true. Very true. So interesting. Now, I guess we can't really get too deep into a discussion of the year 1964 without discussing the tragedy that kind of occurred in November of last year.
Uh, well, I would not call the Beatles a tragedy. I
Oh.
think their music is just fine.
Well, I was addressing what happened on November 22nd.
Right,
Uh,
the Beatles. Oh no, you're talking about yes, the tragedy in Texas. So interestingly, we watched Walter Cronkite live as he broke up on television, and we watched his coverage for an hour and a half before he was relieved, and then we had all the people in the Journey. So the Journey covers the world. We have
mhm.
2 correspondents in England, one in West Germany, one who just defected from Leningrad, in
Oh,
fact.
wow.
We have someone who's coming in from Australia. So it's truly a worldwide operation. And when Kennedy was shot, we had 24-hour coverage. Every few hours, we had another article coming in from one of our many correspondents. So that was a time when we all came together, and it was a national tragedy. I feel like President Johnson is doing a fine job
Hmm.
carrying on Kennedy's legacy. He got Kennedy's tax cut through. He seems to be pushing the civil rights bill. If he can just handle Vietnam, I think we'll be set.
Yeah. I know that one thing that LBJ is working on is the war on poverty. On January 8th, he addressed that he was really going to be attacking not only just fixing poverty, but trying to find a cure for poverty.
Right. I saw that State of the Union. It was very inspirational. What's interesting is, as this State of the Union was going on, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who happens to live in January 8th, 2019.
Oh,
And
wow.
he said that his president was also making a speech, but that the president in 2019 was not nearly as inspirational, and far more exclusive rather than inclusive.
Mm,
Um, Gosh, I can't imagine politics going to hell so badly in 55 years, but you never can tell, obviously. Uh, Life is stranger than science fiction, which is
that's
actually
true.
the main topic of the Journey's coverage, in fact.
That is true. Well, as Bob Dylan said, the times they are changing. I think that he actually released that song this year. Did he not?
Last year, yeah, his
Last
second
year.
album
That's right.
was quite good, and he's quite a singer. He has no trouble finding notes. He just doesn't know what to do with them when he gets them.
It's true. Well, speaking on music, you of course did see the Ed Sullivan Show where the Beatles appeared, and what is your opinion on these long-haired, odd-looking creatures?
So, as you know, I have rather more hair than is typical for my time. I
Hmm.
am what people might call a beardy.
Hmm.
And I have to say, I like the idea of not having to have my hair cut every week.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely good. Do you think that Have you seen the response that they create in teenage girls?
I have, and I have not created that response in teenage girls in several weeks, so
That
I'm a
might be
little
safe.
envious. Yes.
So, but yeah, it seems like there's a ton of influence coming in from England right now. We've got like a lot of fashion coming in. There's a group, they've only been together for 18 months right now, called the Rolling Stones. I guess they're on their American tour. They're going to be on the Mike Douglas show on March 23rd, so I guess you'll be able to tell me how that goes.
I've heard of them. They're also they are not as slick as the Beatles, although they
Mm.
dress nicely too. And I understand they're more blues oriented. The British band that I've gotten into recently is the Dave Clark Five. They're
Ah.
very loud in a way that I have just not heard on the radio. They're pretty neat.
Hmm. Do you think that a lot of the European bands are coming over to America, especially the British ones, because kind of the stranglehold the BBC holds on the radio stations over there?
Probably, if I were an opportunistic person, I'd probably rent a boat and go out to international waters and broadcast whatever music I wanted.
It's not a bad idea. So very nice. The European fashions are really something. I don't know if you guys are keeping up on this, but hemlines are getting really high, and waistlines are disappearing.
Right. It's too bad about the second one because
Mm.
I like fashion that defines, although pencil skirts are very in. So we actually, although we started out as a strictly science fiction endeavor,
Hmm.
um, I insisted very early on that we get a fashion columnist.
Yes.
And Gwyn Conaway is a member of the Design Guild. She does movies for period pieces, and and she's just extremely knowledgeable on fashion. So every quarter we cover fashion.
Hmm.
So we have watched as the 50s have faded away and the flared skirts have turned to pencil skirts and the space age has started to influence all of our fashion, and it's just really exciting.
Yeah, it is. I wonder if maybe, as we talked about the times changing, women starting to have sort of more of their own say. A lot of these styles harken back to the 1920s,
Hmm.
I would say, and in a lot of way allow women more mobility. They're sort of, instead of emphasizing the womanly sexual qualities, more of a gamine, sort of an androgynous kind of thing. Do you think that that has anything to do with the cultural zeitgeist, or do you think this is just a fashion trend that's going to fizzle and burn away?
I think that's very insightful. In fact, I'm going to probably steal that for my next
Oh.
presentation. So we had Betty Friedan come out with the feminine mystique
Mm-hmm.
just last year, and the second wave of feminism is definitely on its way. And I think the two are absolutely related.
Yeah,
Well done.
very much so. So we've got a lot of post-war prosperity going around now. Do you think that maybe because of that, people are getting bored, and maybe that that's what's facilitating all these social, cultural upheavals that we're having right now?
I think we have a combination of two things. We've got prosperity, so no one's really hurting, so we can really strike that. People are plenty hurting.
Mm-hmm.
We've got segregation is coming to the fore, finally being addressed in a big way. And women, of course, are breaking out of the shackles that they've had. But we don't have the crises in our we now have the ability to focus on the internal crises of our company of our
Mm.
country, and we've been coming out of such a repressive regime since World War II that I think this revolutionary backlash is inevitable. I think this is the year that's going to be the flashpoint, and I think things are going to get more dramatic from here.
Of course, there's a group of people who are having something of a knee-jerk reaction right now. Barry Goldwater is getting a lot of attention, as is the Birch Society. Do you have anything to say about those?
I have plenty to say about them. If I were to draw a line, if I was to make a prediction of how we could get to this, whoever is in the White House in January 8th, 2019,
Hmm.
from here, it would be a direct line from Barry Goldwater with his nativist reactionary policies. And I don't think he's doing anything special. I think conservatives were fine with the way things were in the 40s and 50s, but now that we're progressing past that era, I think they want to go back. I
Hmm.
think they want to make America great again in some way that they feel that America was once great.
Hmm.
And while Barry Goldwater and John F. Kennedy were good friends, and I think he has some admirable qualities, the fact is we do not need the primitives of the grand old party taking over this country. And my bet is on Nelson Rockefeller, although he got a smashing disappointment in New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago in the primary with Henry Cabot Lodge winning the primary. This is the man who probably can't be the president, but he's probably certainly edged Rocky out of being president, which is probably going to give it to Goldwater.
Mm. Yeah, you think Goldwater's in the running?
For the Republican nomination, yes. I have hope that Johnson, who is as canny a politician as any and has a bit of the sympathy left over from Kennedy, will wipe the floor with him.
It kind of reminds me of a movie I saw recently. Well, I guess it just came out in your time. Vincent Price in sort of a unique role, The Last Man Standing. This movie is kind of near and dear to my heart because it's a man who's essentially fighting off vampires. And yeah, not to toot my own horn, but yeah, well, so in this movie, he's boarding himself off from this world outside that's sort of overrun by these vampires, and he's seeking to find a cure for this social change that's coming through. Do you think that that's a commentary, or do you think that that's just kind of silliness?
Well, interestingly, that movie is based on a Richard Matheson
Mm-hmm.
novel called I Am Legend that came out 10 years ago. And we just covered it on The Journey, in fact. So we cover all the science fiction films that come out. And Rose Benton covered it because she's a huge Vincent Price fan. She thought the movie was fair. Other people liked it better. I don't think it's necessarily a commentary on anything. I think Richard Matheson just can write a really good cracking screenplay.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think what's interesting is we were talking about Goldwater, the Birch Society, and sort of this new resurgence of the far right that's coming through, and it's affecting everything, even in Playboy, the March issue of Playboy. If you go ahead and take a look at that,
I definitely have taken a look at it.
but if you take a look at the articles, and you don't look at Nancy Scott Centerfold and
Anymore.
but interestingly, in the same issue that has the Girls of Russia, they also feature Ayn Rand in an interview. And you know a little about Ayn Rand, don't you?
Tell me, I actually am not familiar with
Ah,
her work.
her,
Okay.
a woman who grew up in communism and has come to America, and she is sort of the founder of the objectivist movement. She kind of believes in sort of a very pro-capitalist, anti-communist, objectivist mentality. Do what is best for the self, as opposed to kind of being a martyr for society or serving others. Your life is yours alone. It's an interesting stance in philosophy. I'd have to say Nietzsche kind of beat her to the punch, but yeah, she actually did an interview in Playboy where she talked
With
about.
clothes on.
Well, yeah. Well, have you seen Ayn Rand? So,
I think it was Robert Heinlein who once said, "All women are beautiful. Some are more beautiful than others."
there you go. But yeah, she did a interview where she had kind of addressed this new sort of uprising, this sort of response to LBJ and the new social change, and saying that none of this really means anything if you can't be anti-communist without being pro-capitalist, and that the detestable state of our society, which she calls it, is all due, according to the Birch Society and people who might follow Goldwater, due to a communist conspiracy. What do you think about it? You think that there's a communist conspiracy afoot?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Uh, well, I've seen what happens when this country gets too anti-communist. So perhaps some communism is in order. Truthfully, I actually have relatives behind the Iron Curtain, and being Jewish behind the Iron Curtain is not fun. And stories I have from my friend from Leningrad indicate that things aren't great. So I have no illusions that our fellow travelers behind the Iron Curtain are any more enlightened than we are. That said, using them as a convenient scapegoat, or any subculture as a convenient scapegoat, is always ill-advised.
Yeah. But I think one of the biggest, now we talked about, like, films, Playboy, but comics are kind of having a moment right now. 10 years ago, we had the Hays Code come through, which kind of put comics in a slump. If you're not familiar with the Hays Code, it's kind of a code that stated that all comics had to. Well, you could explain it, I guess.
Yeah, it killed girls' comics for one thing. But go
Pretty
on, I'm sure you're
much.
going to say it better than I could.
Well, they pretty much just decided that comics could not have any kind of radical sentiments in them, any kind of pro-communist kind of agenda, which really people were not sure what was going to be read as pro-communist. So storylines really became very dull, very unmotivated because the writers' hands were tied. Now we're having just a crazy, like speculative fiction, science fiction, all sorts of different storylines are coming through. What are some of your favorites that you've seen?
Well, we definitely love Comics of the Journey, and we cover them at least twice a year. Um, I love the diversity I'm starting to see in comic books. It's going beyond just superpowered people in underwear,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's complicated, interesting people in underwear. Um, I there is a joke. What's more Jewish than comic books? The answer is the Torah, but not much. So we have a lot of Jewish creators in comics, and some of the greatest, like Stan Lee, are just writing tons and tons, especially under the new imprint Marvel, which
Mm-hmm.
just came out a few years ago from the ashes of Atlas. Um, so they're coming out with greats like the Fantastic Four, the Amazing Spider-Man, the Avengers. There's a new comic called the X-Men that's one of my particular favorites. And there are these stories about real people who have flaws, sometimes handicaps.
Mm-hmm.
Often society doesn't appreciate what they do. Sometimes they're actually persecuted by society. The teams often don't get along very well. They're very human in a way that we have not seen from National, or as the fans call it, DC, uh,
Mm-hmm.
sometime if ever. Which is not to say National is all bad either. So National has seen the writing on the wall, and it's come out with some great stuff. So, for instance, Sergeant Rock is a great World War II comic, more realistic if less fun than Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. They also have the Doom Patrol, which looks a lot like the X-Men, and probably because they both derive from the same place, which was an early draft for Fantastic Four.
Mm.
And the Doom Patrol also features a bunch of people who were born with powers or collected them along the way, led by a paraplegic super genius fighting evil. And I just love it. I love that
Yeah.
stuff. They're starting to do real social commentary. I would love it if we got to see a black superhero. I suspect that'll be coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see more focus on women superheroes. I love Wasp. I love Elasti-Woman. I love Invisible Girl.
Yeah. Those are all good characters, and where I think they're so interesting, like you talked about, not just people with superpowers in their underwear. Superman, of course, leading the charge as far as that goes. And Superman is an alien, a person from another world who has all these unearthly powers, but is always appreciated for it. Is always everybody kind of rejoices at what Superman does, and he never really has to confront his difference that often. I mean, there are issues, but mostly it's just that he's sort of celebrated. Whereas, say in Doom Patrol or in Fantastic Four, especially the Thing and Fantastic Four, they're really having to deal with how their difference from society affects them, how it affects their interpersonal relationships. Two of the members of Fantastic Four are married. That's Sue Storm and, of course, Mr. Fantastic. And then she was working alongside her brother, which I wouldn't do. Um, and it's just this really interesting dynamic, and it's real. That
I think Superman represents something very interesting,
mm-hmm.
despite the fact that Ellis Island essentially was closed down in the early 20s,
Yeah.
and luckily my ancestors made it here just under the gun. I
Oh,
mean, I'm
congratulations.
thank you,
Hey.
all immigrants. Um, but Superman still comes from an American tradition that
Mm-hmm.
we are open to immigrants as long as you play by the rules and become one of us. We are a melting pot. We want all. LBJ said in his State of the Union, we want people to come to this country. That's what makes America great. Is immigrants and
Mm-hmm.
foreigners. And yes, Superman is as foreign as they get. He's an alien, and yet he has adopted the American way of life, truth, justice, and the American way. And I don't think anyone can have a fault with that.
No.
Um, so as long as you're willing to be an American, come from anywhere, be anything.
Yeah.
I think that's that's a beautiful thing about Superman. I think.
Yeah. Now I'm a big fan of Superman myself. I think my favorite right now probably would be Doom Patrol, and it could just have to do with my last name, so, which is Latvian, of course. So, but yeah, I really, and Daredevil we touched on just a little bit.
Right, Daredevil
Hmm.
issue 1 just came out,
Yeah,
and and that stars a person who can't see,
yeah.
and that's pretty interesting. And yes, he can make up for it because his other senses are incredibly acute, but at the same time, he can't read
Hmm.
unless it's in Braille, and he's a lawyer, so everything he has to do is read.
Yeah, it's true. And a lot of that I think is overcoming adversity. It's we're seeing examples now where it's not, oh poor me, oh what a tragedy this is. It's like, here's the card I was dealt and we're going to make do.
Right,
And not only make do, we're going to excel,
right,
as Daredevil of course does.
right.
Because he could feel sorry for himself, but instead he turns that energy around and he defends the people. So, and in Hell's Kitchen, which is there's really something to be said about that. It's not a plush neighborhood.
Right.
So, but let's see. Now, of course, we can't talk about time travel without addressing Doctor Who. Are you a fan of that show?
So I have never seen an episode of
Hmm.
Doctor Who because I live in the United States
Hmm.
and it's only being aired in England.
Oh.
However, we do have a British correspondent solely for the purpose of covering those episodes. Her name is Jessica, and she has been doing an excellent job since it came out in December talking about this show, which looks very interesting if somewhat low budget, but what isn't,
Hmm.
on science fiction. But right now they are in the middle of Marco Polo's China. Before they had gone to 100,000 years ago. Um, I understand they're going to be going to different planets and
Yeah.
other times. So that's a fascinating show. I'd love to watch more of it. Also, we did an article, it was by someone else, one of our other team who's into esoteric music, talked about the creation of the theme for Doctor Who, which I have
Hmm.
heard. I got sent a reel to reel tape of it,
Oh.
and it's just fantastic. It's all cut together from snips of electronic music put to tape, and it's such a neat theme. If you guys get a chance to hear it, it is the cutting edge of music. This theme to
Hmm.
Doctor Who.
Very interesting stuff. I guess let's talk about some more American television shows. How about some Star Trek? Are you a fan?
I'm afraid I haven't heard of that show.
Oh, no?
I no.
Oh, that's a shame. Uh,
Right now, Twilight Zone is in its 5th season. Outer
ah.
Limits is in its first. My Favorite Martian is a big hit
Oh, there you go.
this year. Um, those are the science fiction shows with which I'm familiar.
Hmm. So, Twilight Zone, that's an interesting one. Like we were talking about the ability to address social issues through a medium like comic books. I feel like Twilight Zone is really taking attack and really kind of exposing people to, for the longest time, uh, all the media sources were just like people singing and dancing and making merry. And Twilight Zone is really taking some roughshod storylines and creating some characters who are really maybe not the most likable, but you, teaching experience. Like watching it is, it forces us to expand our thoughts. What's your thought on that?
I do want to point out that anthology shows are nothing new.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, when Twilight Zone came out, there were several other science fiction horror anthology shows on the air. One was narrated by Boris Karloff,
Oh yeah.
one was narrated by Roald Dahl. That said, Twilight Zone is definitely a cut above. Rod Serling is a master
Mm-hmm.
of writing, although as he has admitted himself, he's writing a bit too many of the episodes and he's getting a little tired.
Yeah.
But he's also hired people like Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont to write some truly wonderful episodes. He has definitely made some pointed social commentary in his stuff
Yeah.
and made us think. And this is something he's always wanted to do. I think he has opened the door for better television. I think The Outer Limits is in the Twilight Zone's tradition. I understand the Twilight Zone has been canceled this year
Mm.
because Rod Serling wants to go on to other things, but I would not be surprised if the legacy of that show continues for decades to come. There might be revivals of Twilight Zone over the years, I would imagine.
Yeah. It's always kind of interesting to me to see what shows are getting canceled. Like for 4 years now, the animated series, the Bullwinkle Show,
Mm,
has been on the air, and now that it's running on NBC opposite of Lassie, it's the ratings are plummeting, but it's so much more intelligent kind of humor and just so much more plot driven than, I mean, Lassie, you've seen one episode, you've seen them all. Nothing against Lassie, she's adorable, but what are your thoughts on things like that?
I believe Timmy has fallen in the well.
Again. Well, that's what they need, a crossover
Right.
episode.
Uh,
So,
so I absolutely adore Rocky and Bullwinkle. They're in
mhm.
their 5th season, and I would be very sad to see them go because they're one of the wittiest shows on television. Rocky and Bullwinkle comes from that tradition of Warner Brothers cartoons
Mhm.
where it hits both at the young level and at the adult level. And it would be terrible to see it go. The Flintstones came out a few years ago, and that
Right.
was one that started out as more for adults and has become a kiddie show. The Jetsons came out, and that was strictly a kiddie show, and I was never impressed with the Hanna-Barbera efforts. So
Mm.
to lose Rocky and Bullwinkle would be very sad.
I think so too. But, well, maybe something will happen on the set of Lassie. You never know. Not that I wished Lassie ill at all. Did you think that TV is going to be starting to be more adventurous? Do you think that we're going to see that as an increasing trend? Or do you think that it's just diversifying itself? It's just making more things available.
Well, it'll be in color. That's kind of
Oh,
nice. We've got several shows out in color now: Bonanza, Hazel, the Lucy Show, which is far better than its prequel because Lucille Ball actually gets to be her own woman and really funny actually.
hmm.
I think TV is definitely on the improving trend. So Nelson Minow, the head of the FCC, a couple years ago, described TV as the vast wasteland, which was a very profound statement and caused a lot of people to think about what television is and how to make it better. And I think we've seen some improvements. This year there was a show called The Great Adventure,
Hmm.
which is a bunch of dramatized vignettes from American history. Um, and they've been interesting. This sort of educational television. I think it's kind of like what Doctor Who is supposed to be across the pond. This
Yeah.
both educational and engaging, which is what I try to do.
Right.
So I think television is getting better and smarter. But I'm also I pick when I sit in front of the idiot box. I'll watch Combat, I'll watch The Lieutenant, I'll watch Burke's Law, but I won't watch the Beverly Hillbillies.
Mm.
I won't watch the Flintstones. I won't watch the multitude of westerns that just won't die, like Gunsmoke. um, so I have a biased view of television. Also,
Mm.
I know people are really annoyed with commercials, but the fact is, when we have just 2 commercials per half hour, and it's always something innocuous like Saran wrap,
Mm.
or cigarettes. Who doesn't want cigarette commercials on their television? People enjoying themselves, taking a puff, and being extremely healthy, and you can't smell it over the air.
That's true. That's true. Even Fred Flintstone.
Right.
So yes, as Winston is toasted and good, taste good like
Like
a
a
cigarette
cigarette should.
should. That's right.
Yes.
So, but talking about people writing screenplays, I mean, I guess every screenplay starts as a story, and we're starting to see some really amazing speculative fiction coming onto the scene. What are some of your favorites?
Science fiction is definitely undergoing a transformation. It was all gadgets and gimmick
Mm-hmm.
stories and spaceships in the 40s, and over the 50s it became something more subtle and psychological. And in the 60s, we're having what in England they're calling the new wave of science fiction, and really focusing more on the human aspect
Yeah.
of what technology will do to us. And it's very exciting. What good books have I read lately? Um, you'll have to come back to me. I have so many.
I.
Margaret St. Clair came out with Sign of the Labrys last year, which
Hmm.
was pretty interesting, if a little funkily New Age religion-y. Like I said, the Martin Kaiden book Maroon was very good. Um, there's an excellent novella that came out late last year by Poul Anderson called The Night Faces, which was a love triangle on an alien planet with all sorts of weird biology, which was just really interesting. They're just they're going into new and interesting places with their science fiction. A couple years ago, Daniel Galouye came out with a book called Dark Universe. It takes place after the apocalypse, and everyone's living underground in complete lightlessness. So everyone's blind.
Yeah.
And humans have adapted in two ways. Some have evolved night vision, which means there's something like Daredevil. There's things they can't do, but they can see in the dark. Others are just completely blind, but have pretty good sense of hearing. And what's fascinating about that book is, in the end, they are able to come out into the light again. And there is some talk about whether they're actually better off. Were they really handicapped before? Now that they're in this bewildering world of light, is this a better situation? And I thought that was a very interesting examination of the handicapped experience. Are people really worse off because they're handicapped, or are they just differently able?
Right.
That kind of the interesting discussion in a speculative fiction sort of way, I just find really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I guess one piece that I really enjoyed is Ursula K. Le Guin's The Word of Unbinding, which appeared in Fantastic Stories of Imagination. Are you familiar with that at all?
Did that one just come out?
I think it did just come out.
So I am familiar with Ursula K. Le Guin. She's one of several dozen women authors who are writing at this time. She came out with a story a couple of years ago called April in Paris, which is a lovely time travel story. And I liked it so much I awarded it the Galactic Star, which is sort of the Galactic Journeys Hugo Awards.
Very nice.
I have not read the story you're talking about because I can only read so much. We cover everything that comes out, and we do, in fact, cover Fantastic. Victoria Silverwolf covers Fantastic, and I believe that story was just covered, and that article will come out in 2 days.
Interesting.
But I don't have any words for you at this moment because I haven't read it yet.
Oh, no worries. You were talking about a time travel story that she wrote, and now you yourself being a time traveler, are there representations of time travel that you find offensive in any way?
I can't say that there's any I find offensive. I think the neatest one I read was there was a John Brunner book that came out a few years ago. I think it's called Worlds Without Number. I could be getting the title wrong. And that book starts in the 20th century in an England that had been conquered by Spain, by the Armada in the 17th century or 16th century. And the basic premise to that book in the end is you can't have a universe with time travel because in the end it'll reset itself as people keep changing the timeline until you get a universe where time travel was never invented. So in other words, if you have a universe where time travel is possible, there will be no time travel in that universe.
Well, that makes sense, I suppose.
So I guess I find that offensive because I'm a time traveler and I'm here, so clearly that premise is false.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But did you ever worry about that? What they call the butterfly effect, that you might, in one of your travels, disrupt something in a negative way and come back to an alternate timeline?
Well, if I can change things for the better so that the State of the Union address in 2019 is not markedly worse than the one in 1964, then I say bring on the butterflies.
Well, there you go. So is there anything that you can think of that's going on right now in 1964 that you might want to talk about or make sure that we address on the show?
I think the biggest thing about 1964 is the Cold War still looms large in the public consciousness. In January, we had Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, which was a very funny and yet strangely and terrifyingly plausible film. We had the book Failsafe, which is also being turned into a movie with a similar premise of us on the brink of accidental Armageddon. I'm heartened because last year the superpowers signed the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, so now they won't be blowing up bombs above ground.
Well, that's nice.
Which is too bad because I'll have to find some other place to get my strontium supplements.
Oh.
But I would like to hope that we don't blow ourselves up in the next few years. But it's hard to fathom a world where we don't, given how close we are to the edge. And how close we came in October 1962, for instance.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So is that, would you say that's a pressing concern? Is that something that you think about on a daily basis? Or
I absolutely. It's something that's in the background. It's that backache that you don't notice until someone asks you how
hmm
your back is. But absolutely, everyone is worried about that. And the only two things I would say that would rival nuclear destruction as things we're scared of are overpopulation. I
hmm
think everyone is worried that in 50 years we might have as many as 5 billion people on this planet.
That's crazy.
And could we really support that many people? The other There was a book that recently came out called Silent Spring.
hmm
It's by the same lady who did the Seas Around Us, I think is what it was called. She's an oceanographer, but she's also an environmentalist. And there's some concern that we are poisoning our world beyond the ability of it to be able to sustain us. I mean, you go to Los Angeles, you can't see your face in front of you because of the smog.
Mm.
There are rivers that are catching fire in the Midwest.
Yeah.
We're going to have to do something about this.
hmm And do you think, as a time traveler, do you think that there's any insight from the past that you would want to offer to the people of the future who might find themselves in scenarios where, basically nature has kind of hit its limit?
Watch Day of the Trifid, I guess. Um, more on a more serious note, I think people are aware even now in the early 60s how much carbon dioxide we're putting into the
hmm
atmosphere. I read a bunch of articles in the 50s about how the temperature has been going up steadily. And you can draw a line. I will make a bold prediction right now that between now and say, a random date, 55 years from now, the global temperature will be up by at least 1 or 2 degrees
Crazy.
Celsius, and that's going to have profound effects on life. I think we need to start coming up with alternative energies now
Hmm.
to deal with this.
Yeah. Well, solar power seems promising.
It certainly does. We're using it for spacecraft all the time, but it has not seen use on Earth. The big alternative energy source we're using right now is nuclear power.
Mm.
Um, to the point where we've got people like Edward Teller saying, "Hey, why don't we dig a big canal across this country using atomic bombs? That seems perfectly safe."
Hmm. Your opinion on that?
It does not seem perfectly safe.
No. Okay. Well, thank you for this interview, and it's very interesting getting a chance to connect with our past through this. And where can people find you if they want to connect with you and learn more about you and your team and all your research that you're doing?
So our main presence is located at Galactic Journey, all one
hmm
word, .org. We also have a presence on a platform called Twitter, where we are at Journey Galactic. And that's where we have our news feed. So if you want to know what's going on, there's a constant news ticker telling you what's happening in 1964. We also have an Instagram account at Journey Galactic, and wherever I go, I take my little Kodak land camera around
Oh, nice.
and take pictures of things that are period to 1964 or before. And in fact, at the end of the show, I'm going to take a picture of our uh, amazing host.
Oh, thank you.
And we also have a presence on Facebook, which is also just under Galactic Journey. But the main place you want to go is galacticjourney.org.
Hmm. And if that's not enough for people, if people in the San Diego area or other places might want to actually encounter you in person, be in the presence of an actual time traveler, how would they do that?
It does happen. I want to take this opportunity to thank my fans. Both of you are wonderful. Um, I perform at the Wavelength, the
hmm
space-themed microbrewery, every quarter, and I will be again on June 7th. I'm going to be performing at the Reuben H. Fleet Space Theater on May 6th, talking about the Mercury space program. And I go to conventions all the time. So I will be at San Diego Comic-Con, although I'm not on the program this year. I'm going to be at BayCon in San Francisco. I'll be at WorldCon in Dublin. I will be at LostCon in LA in November. Probably there's a San Diego Doctor Who Con
Oh, wow.
in October. We went last year and talked about the making of Doctor Who. We'll be talking about the first season of Doctor Who. So if it's a local convention, we just did San Diego Comic Fest. All of these shows that we do, by the way, we tape so that you can watch, and you can see them if you go to the live events tab at galacticjourney.org.
Okay, very cool. And Is there any risk for people who come to see you live that they might get sucked into the past?
Oh, absolutely. When this endeavor started, it was just me, and now there are 20 people on the journey. However, we have found that being on the journey is good for people's careers.
Hey,
We got nominated for the Hugo Award last year. We got the Serling Award a couple years before that. We're hoping we'll get the Hugo this year. So anyone associated with us, it rubs off.
very cool. All right, thank you so much, Traveler, and I guess I will let you be on your way to discover new and interesting things.
Yeah, I got to go light a cigarette. I'm just kidding. I don't smoke.
Well,
Surgeon General has said you shouldn't, and he's right.
all right. Thank you so much. And okay, guys, so you heard him, galacticjourney.org. Check him out. All right. Talk to you later. Bye. Hey guys, it's me, Nap again. I just wanted to take a moment at the end of the show right here to thank our extra special Patreons, The Grammarica Show and Nikki Benfield. I don't know what I'd do without your guys' support. Thank you so much. You help make this show and the Creeping Wave Radio possible. So if you'd like to become a Patreon, even $1 donation helps out so much. You can go to www.patreon.com/lucidnap. All one word, lucidnap. We're going to be revamping our rewards really soon, so there's going to be plenty of opportunities to get free sketches, stickers, and possibly a guest appearance on the show. Could that be potentially disastrous? Yes! Probably, in fact. But you know what? Your support means that much to me that I'm willing to put myself at risk. And hey, while you're frittering away your life on the internet, why not check out www.lostbreadcomic.com for my related comic books and prints. Yes, I make art prints and comic books. How nerdy is that? That's okay though. You can go check them out, see if you like them, go ahead and buy some. It would mean a whole lot to me. Okay guys, thank you for listening. Thank you so much. I can't even tell you how much wow. Just, okay. You know, I gotta go before I tear up. You guys! Okay. Talk to you later. Bye for real this time.